Hello and welcome to the lecture on physicalism. This is an important theory, but the presentation should not be too lengthy. We also will not be tying this theory in with just one major philosopher. Physicalism is a common view among many philosophers, and by far the dominant view among research scientists. Again, we will just do a brief review. Remember, dualists say that there are two fundamental kinds of substances in the universe, physical and mental. The dualist theory that we spent the most time with in this category is Cartesian interactive dualism, but there are other dualist theories we mentioned briefly as well, such as epiphenomenalism and parallelism. Monist theories say that there is only one type of substance in the universe. Idealists hold that this one substance is mental, while physicalists or materialists hold that this universe is entirely physical in nature. This lecture deals with physicalism, which is sometimes called materialism. Physicalism is probably the better term, both because the term materialism is ambiguous with terminology used in political philosophy, and because modern physicalists do not believe that everything is material, but rather that everything is physical. Energy, space-time, and the fundamental physical laws of the universe are more clearly encapsulated under the term physicalism. For physicalists, everything in the universe is ultimately boiled down to the physical world. This does not mean that they deny the existence of abstract objects such as morality or numbers, but the argument is that ultimately all these things can be explained in terms of the physical world. For example, our understanding of the abstract notion of a square, or what it is like to see the color red, are explained by our neurology. Reductive physicalism holds that any higher level behavior can be explained by lower level physical behaviors, while there are also non-reductive physicalists who hold that while everything in the universe is physical, there are some behaviors that emerge when multiple physical elements interact and which cannot be predicted from the parts. These are two broad categories, of course, and there are finer subcategories, but we will not be going into those in any detail. Physicalism is probably the most popular modern stance, not necessarily among the general population, which is largely dualist, at least in the United States, but among scientists and philosophers. Under this view, all people and animals are just biological machines. That's to say that we are made of smaller physical parts, all following the physical laws of nature, much like gears in a clockwork mechanism. In terms of science, this view has been tremendously successful. For example, breaking with the assumption that life is a mysterious non-physical something has allowed medical science to advance to the point that it has today. Scientists do not ask what cells decide to do, nor do they attribute their workings to an unknowable, mysterious life essence, but instead they look at the molecular clockwork which allows them to function as they do. By thinking of our bodies in this way, they have been able to develop drugs that help alleviate pain, boost our immune system, combat allergic reactions, and so forth. This same understanding has allowed scientists to discover how to manipulate stem cells, as well as to develop forms of genetic therapy. Physicalism includes the view that our minds are also mere biological machines. This can be contrasted with interactive dualism, which views our bodies as biological machines, but then supposes that there are non-material selves, or at least non-material elements, within these machines which account for mental events. This leads us to the primary difficulty with physicalism, which is how to account for mental events. How can mental events be explained by mere physical events? How can mental events be explained physically? Imagine you are a biologist who knows everything that there is to know about the sense of taste. You know exactly what molecules excite which nerve endings in the mouth, and exactly which neurons fire in the brain when so stimulated. You also know everything that there is to know about the chemistry of apples, every molecule present and the quantity of which are present. Now also imagine that, in spite of knowing so much about taste in apples, you have never been allowed to taste anything but milk for your entire life. Finally, imagine that one day you get to take a bite out of one of the apples you have been studying. Do you think that you learn anything new when you bite into the apple, or did you already have a full understanding of exactly what it tastes like? This is a variation of Frank Jackson's famous thought experiments about a woman named Mary who is imagined to know everything that there is to know about sight and the color red, but is raised in a black and white room until she gets to see red for the first time. This provides us with a puzzle. On the one hand, it seems as if no amount of physical explanation can ever get at the what it is likeness of tasting an apple or seeing red. This what it is likeness, that's to say conscious experiences, are called by the philosophical name of qualia. This is a term worth remembering. Those who object to physicalism say it isn't just that we currently do not have an explanation. It seems as if it is impossible to ever even begin to explain first-person conscious experiences with third-person descriptions of physical events. One more intuitive way to see this is through a thought experiment made famous by David Chalmers. David Chalmers is a modern dualist, though not in the Cartesian sense, as he would not hold that the complex human mind can exist without the body via anything like a soul. I actually met him at a conference, and he is a very interesting and likable guy. Anyway, he proposed the following thought experiment involving a zombie world. We are to imagine a world exists exactly like our own, but inhabited entirely by zombies. Now, by zombies, Chalmers does not mean the rotting, animated corpses of living humans such as in a George R.R. Romero movie or the AMC series The Walking Dead. No, these are philosophical zombies. Your philosophical zombie is identical to you in every way. It is identical to you right down to the last spin of the last electron. Because their bodies, including their brains, are composed of identical physical machinery, they do exactly what you would do. So right now, the zombie you is watching this video, which is discussing consciousness. The only difference is that these zombies do not have any mental experiences. There's something that it is like to be you watching this video, but it is not like anything at all to be a zombie. They have no qualia. This is all a bit odd. So right now your zombie would be watching this video about consciousness, but would have no consciousness herself or himself. She might even say, if you shouted at the screen, how strange these zombies are, just like me but not conscious. Your zombie, because she is physically identical in an entire world that is physically identical, would also say how strange these zombies are, just like me but not conscious, even though she would not be conscious herself. Likewise, if you stub your toe, you will shout out in pain and maybe utter a curse word and hop up and down on one foot until the pain subsides. Your zombie twin, upon stubbing his or her toe, does exactly the same thing, even though it feels no pain. Your zombie twin will talk about how it feels just as you do, and will do all the things that you feel you are motivated by your conscious experiences to do. Chalmers uses this as an argument for dualism because, he says, since we can imagine a physically identical world not containing conscious experience cannot be physical. This is similar to the Jackson argument we just discussed about seeing red or tasting an apple. Remember that Chalmers is not a Cartesian dualist. One form of such dualism which he argues might be reasonable is epiphenomenalism, whereby conscious experiences do not affect the physical world but supervene on the physical world, by which he means that our conscious experiences are entirely determined by the physical properties of the world, thereby explaining consistency in psychological experiences. But this is not a necessary connection. Further, these mental events do not affect the physical world. The physical world runs on its own like a machine, thus preserving our understanding of science. A detailed discussion of epiphenomenalism and its potential problems goes beyond our intentions for this lecture. What is important here is how this thought experiment helps to illustrate what is so puzzling about conscious experience from a physicalist worldview. There are a number of responses to these objections made by physicalists. The first is that there are a great many things which, in the past, nobody could imagine a scientific explanation for. For example, how living beings are able to grow and reproduce, which is now well understood at the cellular level, but before people knew about cells, this seemed utterly mysterious. Even then, there was great mystery about reproduction until Crick and Watson discovered DNA. But science has a profoundly successful history of being able to solve these problems. Another response to these objections is that counter-arguments like those in the thought experiments we have been discussing seem to beg the question. If we assume that the scientist knows everything that there is to know about sight or taste, then she would know what it is like to do these things herself. We find it difficult to say how she would know precisely because we do not yet know the physical explanation. If we assume that the scientist can't understand conscious experiences, then we are assuming that dualism is true as one of the premises in order to prove that dualism is true. If that is actually what is going on, this is logically problematic. If you have taken my logic course, we would have covered circular reasoning. If not, it is worth looking up. Physicalists also claim that dualism seems to have more significant problems and therefore claim that physicalism is the more reasonable theory. We discussed the significance of the problem of interaction with interactive dualism when discussing that theory. Also, just saying that conscious experience is immaterial doesn't seem to help explain it in any way. It just claims that whatever explains it is a different type of stuff. Nevertheless, this is a very powerful thought experiment because it underscores how it seems that we can't even get traction on the problem with the physical explanation. This, in fact, is such a difficult problem that is sometimes called the hard problem of philosophy. This is saying something given that philosophy is a field known for its hard problems. And that about wraps it up for this lecture. We didn't spend a great deal of time aligning physicalism with a particular philosopher who endorses it, but there are many kinds of physicalism and a long history without a single philosopher that really clearly seems to epitomize and revolutionize this view. It is, however, a dominant theory, dominating science especially, but also, to the best that I am able to determine, modern analytical philosophy. The stunning success of the scientific method, which presupposes physical causes, has a great deal to do with this prominence. Well, that's it for now. Until next time.